Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Becker, and welcome to Write Better Stories. Today, I am going to do another Charlie Kaufman review, reaction, somewhere in between. Doesn't really matter. I just watched his Netflix film that just came out. I'm thinking of ending things, and it was a lot. It was really not what I expected at all, and maybe that's my fault because I've seen enough Charlie Kaufman movies, and I just read Ant Kind, and I should have known that it was going to have some surprises. But even with all of that, I just really did not expect the way that this was going to go. And I'll be honest, I think that when it ended, my immediate thought was kind of like, that was it? Like, really? I thought there was going to be like a lot more, kind of tie up some loose ends. But then, even in just maybe about a half an hour since it has finished, it's really kind of affected me. It feels very bleak and very depressing, which again should not be a surprise for a Charlie Kaufman movie. But I'm going to do my best to kind of explain what this movie was, if anything, and if I can make any sense of it, even though it seems to very intentionally defy any kind of formula or neat summary that you could assign to it. So at the beginning of it, it definitely feels like it is the girl's movie. And in fact, I think her name changes several times. That's why I don't know her name specifically. I know she goes by Lucy at least once. And they kind of promise you a sort of like meet the parents premise. Obviously not as strict of like a Ben Stiller comedy as the actual Meet the Parents movie is, but the premise seems to show that she's the main character and that she's going to enter her boyfriend's world and upbringing and all the antics that ensue. Now, obviously, there are different comments that she's making in the car that she's thinking about ending things. And even though it seems like this is referring to her relationship with her boyfriend, it also seems to have this ominous kind of like suicide connotation too, like she's just thinking of ending it all. And I think, obviously, since it's the title, it ends up taking on a more narrative meaning too. And I'm going to get to that in a second after I explain some of the other things that are going on. Because as they interact throughout the film, it becomes clear that her boyfriend is actually the janitor that they cut to in various scenes. So the probably most like jarring thing that happens earlier in the film is that they keep cutting to this janitor that's cleaning up a high school, and he watches this movie. And in the movie, it's this redheaded waitress who is training a trainee under her, and she is asked to recommend something on the menu, and then the guy that she's training just mentions that she's vegan and announces his love for her, and she gets fired. But then they go outside, and they even though she's fired, the trainee and her are sitting there, and then she's like, wait, you said you loved me, right? And then they hold hands, and then they actually show credits. It's like directed by Robert Zemeckis at the end. And so this is the end of a movie. This would be a very corny kind of like parody of a Hollywood ending that things go well. And I know I'm kind of laying out a lot of information here, but this is what I'm thinking of ending things seems to be a critique of in various ways, that things don't always go well in real life, and they don't have this neat ending to them. It's like we're barreling on toward death, and things don't necessarily get better. They comment various times that things don't have a silver lining. But what makes this interesting is that the boyfriend that the redheaded girl is dating, not in the movie within a movie, but just in I'm Thinking of Ending Things, he is this janitor, and there's a few different clues that they give you throughout. And so when they first get to his house, he offers her some slippers. And then later, when she goes into the high school, the janitor also offers her the same slippers. That's an example. When she goes to the basement after being instructed not to go into the basement, she finds all of these uniforms in the washing machine. And then later, it's the same emblem on the janitor's uniform. So yeah, his uniforms are the boyfriend's the whole time. And then there's this drawer full of thermoses that he has at his parents' house, and then the janitor has a thermos later on. And there might be other ones, but it seems pretty clear. This isn't even like a subtle Easter egg sort of thing. It just seems to be like a part of what you're supposed to take from it, is that this guy is the janitor. But they establish this, and then it's kind of unclear of what to make of this until a little later. So we're going to set that aside for a second. But the girl and her boyfriend end up getting in a bunch of different arguments in the car ride. And actually, like, a lot of the narrative action of this film ends up just being these really, really darkly lit shots of them in a car. And it's actually really beautiful. But it's definitely subverting narrative expectation, especially after kind of promising this quirky, bring your girlfriend to dinner sort of thing. And among the many things that they talk about in the car are the idea that your mother causes you trauma, and the girl basically dismantles that and says that that's like old world misogynistic bullshit. And also that they bring up David Foster Wallace at one point, which I thought was funny, and then she like very quickly doesn't want to talk about that, which I think is just like a nod to the meme, is that David Foster Wallace is obviously like a very kind of like male-centered writer, and it's funny because I cover a lot of him on this channel, but whatever, I'm a fan. And yeah, it's clear that his placement in this film is to sort of demonstrate this sort of like male way of looking at the world that really doesn't appeal to her. And there's a couple other times that they talk about just the way that life doesn't necessarily get better in any kind of Hollywood way. And this is something that should be familiar if you've seen any other Charlie Kaufman movies or if you've read Aunt Kind. They comment on this, is that stories typically give you this really nice happy ending, or at least a sense of summary at the end, and that's not the way that life really works. And so this is what I'm thinking of Ending Things does as a film, is that it really critiques and dismantles the idea of a narrative giving a nice, neat ending to things. And so that's where the title comes in, is that this girl who appears to be the main character is she's thinking of ending things, not just in her relationship or in her life, but that as a person, she has this yearning to have that kind of neat way of summing everything up. But then what's interesting is it shifts, that after they get to the high school, it becomes clear that it's no longer her story really, but it's his story as the janitor and as the boy. And it ends up breaking into this really odd dance sequence that is like reminiscent of a moment earlier in the film when the janitor is mopping something up and he sees this guy and this girl dancing. It seems to me that it's like a more imaginative, explored version of this dance scene from earlier. And they are, the guy and the girl are walking around this high school, and it's really odd because they already established these other kind of analogous characters for them in the movie within a movie. And I thought it would have been a maybe more cohesive exploration of that if they brought those same actors back for the dance sequence, but they didn't. It's another set of actors that play them, but they are analogous because they're wearing the same clothes, and then the girl also has red hair. But then the janitor comes in and like kills the guy who would be him, and then they have these like kind of weird like ribbons falling out of him to have him be killed. And then at the end, it's the guy on stage receiving an award, and this is kind of harking back to earlier when he wins like the Diligence Award, which is a totally useless pin that he gets. But it's almost as if, because I'm thinking of Ending Things is a narrative, it feels obligated to give you this ending, but they really call attention to how false it is to do that. And so everybody's wearing very fake looking old person makeup, and then his mother is on stage referring back to that idea that your mother is like the reason for the way that you turn out the way that you turn out. And then he has this song that he sings, and it's very theatrical on stage, of him just wanting a girl of his own to complete him, which is also something earlier that they talk about as something that we've kind of gotten rid of because women have thoughts and feelings of their own. They're not just like an object for male attention and gratification on their journey. So this is a very abstract movie, and even in describing it, I'm wondering how well of a job I'm doing, because it provides a lot of false starts and red herrings for what a traditional movie would be, but then decides to dismantle them and get rid of them in favor of the way that now as a society we've gotten rid of the way that we traditionally build stories, through the idea of like parents affecting the way that their kids act, or the idea of having a person to attain, usually a woman for a man, in order to complete their journey and their arc. And so even though it dismantles all of those things in the conversation, as a film, it still gives you those things while transferring the attention from the beginning to the woman's point of view to the man's point of view at the end, which is shown to be a construct and hollow and fake. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there. I don't know if there's much more I can wring out of that rag right at this time. But again, I just saw it. I could see it again and have a totally different take on it. But yeah, I think when it ended, I was like, I didn't really like that. But then after I had a little more time to chew on it, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. It really dismantles narrative conventions while still giving them to you. But when it gives you those conventions, it does so in a way that it shows you that there are conventions and maybe problematic from a political perspective. So I hope that teaches you to write better stories or to dismantle the stories that you're writing. Goodbye.